The year of our Lord, 1418, dawned not with a roar, but with a persistent, almost imperceptible hum. It was the hum of a world poised on the precipice, a vast, intricate tapestry woven from ancient traditions and nascent ambitions. For centuries, the rhythms of life had largely been dictated by the sun and the seasons, by the fertile earth and the capricious sea. Empires had risen and fallen, their stones crumbling into dust, their legends fading into whispers carried on the wind. Yet the fundamental struggle for survival, the daily grind of existence, remained the constant, an unyielding current beneath the shifting tides of power and conquest. In the bustling port city of Porto Sol, nestled on the sun-drenched Iberian coast, this hum was amplified, a cacophony of commerce, prayer, and burgeoning curiosity. Porto Sol was a crucible of cultures, a vibrant mosaic of Moorish arches and Gothic spires, of Jewish synagogues and Christian cathedrals. Its narrow, winding streets, perpetually slick with sea spray and the refuse of the day's markets, teemed with life. The air hung heavy with the scent of salt and fish, spices from the distant east, and the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread. Merchants haggled in a dozen tongues, their voices rising above the clatter of carts and the distant cries of gulls. Sailors, their faces weathered by sun and wind, unloaded exotic cargo from ships whose masts pierced the azure sky like skeletal fingers. Here, the world felt both vast and intimately contained, a paradox of infinite possibility and immediate necessity. Amongst this vibrant chaos lived Lara, a young woman of 19 whose hands, though calloused from years of grinding pigments and stretching parchment, possessed a delicate precision. She was an apprentice cartographer, bound to the meticulous and often solitary craft under the tutelage of Master Mateo, a man whose beard was as white as the foam on a winter wave, and whose eyes held the weary wisdom of countless charted voyages. Their workshop, a modest room above a chandlery near the docks, was a sanctuary of order amidst the city's disarray. Scrolls of vellum, meticulously inked with coastlines and mountain ranges, hung from the rafters like ancient tapestries. The scent of beeswax and lamp oil mingled with the faint metallic tang of ink. Globes, both terrestrial and celestial, stood sentinel in corners, their painted surfaces hinting at a world still largely imagined. Lara's days were a monotonous yet mesmerizing dance of detail. She ground lapis lazuli into the vibrant blues of distant oceans, mixed ochre for the sands of unknown deserts, and sharpened quills to a needle-fine point. Her true passion, however, lay not in the mechanics of map-making, but in the stories the maps told, or rather, the stories they hinted at. Each blank space, each dotted line indicating an unverified coast, was a canvas for her imagination. She traced the known routes of the Mediterranean, the established trade lines to Alexandria and Constantinople, but her gaze always drifted westward, to the vast, shimmering expanse of the Atlantic, a realm of myth and terrifying possibility. Master Mateo, a man of few words but profound observation, had recognized this spark in Lara early on. Unlike his previous apprentices who saw only lines and colors, Lara saw narratives. She asked questions that stretched beyond the practicalities of navigation. What lies beyond the pillars of Hercules, Master? Are there truly islands of gold, or merely endless storms? Mateo would often grunt, offering a cryptic answer about the folly of men and the wisdom of the currents. But he never discouraged her curiosity. He taught her the constellations, the subtle shifts of the tides, the whispered legends of ancient mariners. He taught her that a map was not just a drawing, but a living document, constantly evolving, constantly challenging its own certainties. Life in Porto Sol, even for those with a trade, was a precarious balance. The shadow of the Black Death, though, years past, still lingered in the collective memory, a stark reminder of life's fragility. Famines were not uncommon, and the constant ebb and flow of trade meant that fortunes could be made and lost with the turn of a single ship. Taxes were levied by the crown, tithes by the church, and protection money by the local guilds. Survival meant vigilance, hard work, and a healthy dose of pragmatism. For Ilara, it also meant the constant awareness of her place as a woman in a man's world. While Master Mateo treated her with respect, the outside world often saw her as an anomaly, a girl dabbling in the serious business of charts and navigation. She had learned to carry herself with a quiet determination, her gaze steady, her answers precise, deflecting the casual dismissals and veiled condescension. The hum of the world, however, was growing louder. Rumors, like seeds carried on the wind, began to sprout in the taverns and market squares of Porto Sol. Whispers of a new kind of ship designed to brave the open ocean, capable of sailing against the wind. Tales of a distant, fabled land, rich beyond imagining, reachable by sailing west, not east. These were not the wild fancies of drunken sailors, but increasingly the serious pronouncements of ambitious princes and zealous merchants. The Portuguese crown, in particular, was investing heavily in maritime exploration, driven by a thirst for gold, spices, and the desire to outflank the established trade routes controlled by Venice and Genoa. Prince Henry, known as the Navigator, though he rarely sailed himself, was becoming a legendary figure, his name uttered with a mixture of awe and skepticism. One blustery autumn afternoon, a new kind of hum permeated the workshop, one of urgency and intrigue. A grizzled sea captain, his face a roadmap of sun-baked wrinkles, strode into their quiet sanctuary, clutching a rolled-up parchment. He was Captain Mendez, a man known for his daring voyages to the coast of Africa, a man who rarely sought the services of land-bound cartographers. His usual maps were crude, practical things, marked by his own hand with notes on currents and shoals. But this time, his eyes held a glint of something akin to fear, or perhaps profound bewilderment. "Master Mateo," Mendez rasped, his voice, hoarse from years of shouting over storms, "I have something unusual, something that defies my understanding." He unrolled the parchment onto the large oak table, its surface scarred with generations of ink stains and compass marks. Ilara, who had been meticulously cleaning quills, paused, her attention immediately captured. The map was unlike any she had ever seen. It was old, the vellum yellowed and brittle, its edges frayed. The ink was faded in places, but the lines that remained were shockingly precise, depicting a coastline far to the west, a landmass of impossible scale. It showed rivers snaking through vast plains, mountain ranges towering like sleeping giants, and coastlines that stretched for what seemed like an eternity, far beyond any known African shore. But it wasn't just the geography that was unsettling. There were symbols, strange glyphs, and illustrations of creatures that belonged more to myth than reality. Feathered serpents, colossal birds, and what appeared to be cities built into the very cliffs. "I found it," Mendez continued, his voice barely a whisper, "in the wreckage of a Moorish carrack off the coast of the Canaries. It was sealed in a lead tube, as if meant to be preserved against the deepest currents. He pointed a trembling finger at a section of the map where a series of intricate lines converged. These are not our stars, Master. And this land, it cannot be. Mateo leaned over the map, his brow furrowed, his usual composure replaced by a profound stillness. He traced a finger along a jagged coastline, then paused, his gaze fixed on a series of symbols near what appeared to be a vast inland sea. Ilara, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, crept closer, her eyes devouring every detail. The map was a riddle, a challenge, a tantalizing glimpse into a world that should not exist. It spoke of a vastness that dwarfed their known world, of civilizations unimagined, of possibilities that shattered the very foundations of their understanding. This is extraordinary, Captain, Mateo finally murmured, his voice laced with a tremor Ilara had never heard before. And dangerous. He glanced at Ilara, a flicker of warning in his eyes, but it was too late. The map had already taken root in her mind, a seed of insatiable curiosity. It was a tangible piece of the beyond, a whisper from the horizon that promised not just new lands, but a complete redefinition of their world. For Ilara, the hum of Porto Sol had suddenly taken on a new, thrilling frequency, a call to adventure that resonated deep within her soul. The struggle for everyday survival suddenly seemed intertwined with a grander quest, to understand the secrets held within this ancient, impossible chart, and perhaps to be the one to finally chart the unknown. The age of empires and exploration was not just a distant rumor. It had just walked into their workshop, rolled up in a piece of faded vellum. The discovery of Captain Mendez's map cast a long, unsettling shadow over Master Mateo's workshop. What had once been a sanctuary of predictable lines and known quantities now felt charged with an almost forbidden energy. Ilara found herself, drawn to the ancient vellum like a moth to a flame, her fingers tracing its faded contours, her mind wrestling with the implications of its impossible geography. The feathered serpents and cliffside cities, once mere fantastical embellishments, now seemed to pulse with a strange, undeniable reality. Master Mateo, usually a man of meticulous routine, became uncharacteristically withdrawn. He spent hours, hunched over the map, his spectacles perched on the tip of his nose, muttering to himself in low tones. He consulted his vast collection of ancient texts, dusty Roman geographies, Arabic astronomical charts, and the sparse, often contradictory, accounts of medieval travelers, but nothing. Absolutely nothing in his extensive knowledge base could account for the landmass depicted on Mendez's map. It was too large, too detailed, too definitively other. "It defies all known cosmography, Ilara," he declared one evening, his voice heavy with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Ptolemy knew nothing of this. The Arab scholars, for all their wisdom, never spoke of such a place. It is as if an entire continent has been hidden from us, shrouded in the mists of time and the vastness of the ocean." Ilara, ever practical, pointed to the symbols. "What of these, Master? Are they a language? Do they hold a key?" Mateo shook his head, his fingers stroking his white beard. "They are unlike any script I have encountered. Perhaps a form of pictograph, or a highly stylized form of writing. But without a Rosetta Stone, they remain impenetrable." He paused, his gaze distant. The stars, though. Mendez was right. The constellations depicted here, they are subtly different. A few degrees off, a star missing, another one brighter than it should be. It suggests a different vantage point, a different hemisphere entirely. The implications of a different hemisphere, of stars unfamiliar, sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. It wasn't just a new land. It was a new sky, a new world order. The known world, centered around the Mediterranean, suddenly felt small, provincial. Captain Mendez, for his part, was a man torn. He was a seasoned mariner, a man of empirical observation and practical navigation. Myths and legends were the stuff of tavern tales, not the basis for voyages. Yet the map was undeniably real. Its vellum, tangible, its ink a testament to its creation. He had tried to dismiss it as a forgery, a clever hoax. But the sheer detail and the unsettling accuracy of its coastal lines, even in unknown regions, gnawed at him. He had seen enough of the world to know that the unknown was often far stranger than fiction. He returned to the workshop frequently, not for further cartographic work, but to simply stare at the map as if willing it to reveal its secrets. He spoke of the Moorish Carrack, how it had been ravaged by a storm, its crew lost, the lead tube containing the map seemingly the only thing to survive intact. There was a sense of destiny, almost, in its discovery, as if the ocean itself had delivered this impossible truth to their shores. The secret of the map, however, could not be contained indefinitely. Porto Sol, for all its bustling activity, was a small city, and whispers, like the sea mist, permeated every corner. Mendez, in his bewilderment, had sought counsel from a few trusted confidants, and soon the tale of the impossible map began to circulate amongst the city's elite. It reached the ears of the merchants, ever hungry for new markets, and more importantly, it reached the court of Prince Henry. Prince Henry, a man consumed by the dream of maritime expansion, was unlike any other royal. He was not a warrior king, but a scholar, a patron of navigation and exploration. His court at Sagres, a windswept promontory overlooking the Atlantic, was a hub of intellectual ferment, where astronomers, cartographers, shipbuilders, and seasoned captains gathered to share knowledge and push the boundaries of the known world. He had already funded numerous expeditions down the coast of Africa, slowly chipping away at the fear of the green sea of darkness and proving that the world did not end at the equator. When the news of Mendez's map reached Sagres, it was met with a mixture of skepticism and fervent excitement. Many dismissed it as a fanciful fabrication, a relic of ancient superstitions. But Henry, with his insatiable curiosity and his unwavering belief in the potential of the ocean, saw something more. He saw a challenge, a tantalizing possibility that could revolutionize not just trade, but the very understanding of the world. A royal summons arrived at Master Mateo's workshop, carried by a stern-faced courier in the livery of Prince Henry. It was an order, not a request, for Mateo and the map to present themselves at Sagres. Ilara, despite Mateo's initial reluctance to expose her to the political machinations of the court, insisted on accompanying him. She argued that she knew the map almost as intimately as he did, having spent countless hours studying its every line and symbol. Mateo, recognizing the fierce determination in her eyes and perhaps a flicker of his own youthful ambition reflected in hers, finally relented. The journey to Sagres was a short but significant one. The landscape grew wilder, the scent of pine and salt stronger as they approached the southwestern tip of Portugal. Sagres itself was not a grand palace, but a collection of austere, functional buildings, designed for study and observation rather than ostentation. It was a place where the wind howled constantly, a constant reminder of the ocean's immense power. They were ushered into a large, sparsely furnished chamber, dominated by a massive table covered with charts and navigational instruments. Prince Henry sat at the head of the table, a man of serious demeanor, his eyes sharp and intelligent. Around him sat a coterie of advisers, learned scholars, grizzled captains, and ambitious courtiers, their faces a mixture of expectation and suspicion. Mateo, with Alara standing quietly beside him, unrolled Mendez's map onto the table. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The sheer scale and detail of the unknown landmass silenced even the most cynical of observers. Henry leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the map, a flicker of profound wonder in his usually stoic eyes. "Explain this, Master Mateo," Henry commanded, his voice calm but authoritative. Mateo, his voice regaining its usual scholarly precision, recounted Mendez's discovery, the unusual nature of the vellum, the strange symbols, and the subtly different constellations. He spoke of the map's defiance of all known geographical knowledge, of its implications for the size and shape of the world. He presented his arguments with the meticulous logic of a cartographer, acknowledging the impossibility while simultaneously highlighting the undeniable evidence before them. As Mateo spoke, Ilara observed the reactions of those around the table. Some whispered amongst themselves, their faces etched with disbelief. Others, particularly the younger captains, leaned forward, their eyes alight with a nascent excitement. The scholars, initially dismissive, began to frown, their brows furrowed in contemplation. The map was a disruptive force, challenging their long-held beliefs, forcing them to confront the possibility that their understanding of the world was profoundly incomplete. When Mateo finished, a heavy silence descended upon the room. Prince Henry rose from his seat and walked slowly around the table, his gaze sweeping over the map. He stopped at the section depicting the strange cities, his finger hovering over the intricate glyphs. "If this map is true," Henry said, his voice barely a whisper, "then the world is far larger, far more wondrous, and far more challenging than we ever imagined." He turned to Mateo. "And if it is a fabrication, it is a masterpiece of deception, unlike anything I have ever seen." He then turned his gaze to Ilara, who had remained silent, her presence almost unnoticed amidst the assembly of powerful men. "And you, young woman," he said, his eyes piercing, "what do you make of this?" Ilara felt a surge of adrenaline, but she met his gaze steadily. "Your Highness," she began, her voice clear and unwavering, "I have studied this map for weeks. Its precision, even in its unknown elements, speaks to a knowledge far beyond our own. The currents, the depths, the subtle variations in the coastlines. They are drawn with an understanding that feels lived. It is not a dream, Your Highness. It is a record." Her words, delivered with quiet conviction, seemed to resonate in the room. Henry's expression remained unreadable, but a subtle nod from one of his senior captains indicated that her observation had struck a chord. "A record," Henry repeated thoughtfully. "A record of what? A forgotten civilization? A lost voyage?" He paused, then looked at Mateo. "Master Mateo, Captain Mendez, and you, young Ilara. This map, it represents a profound shift. It demands investigation. It demands proof. He then outlined his plan. He would fund an expedition, a small fleet of his newly designed caravels, ships built for speed and endurance on the open ocean. Captain Mendez, despite his initial apprehension, would command the lead vessel. Master Mateo would serve as the expedition's chief cartographer, tasked with verifying every line and contour of the impossible map. And Ilara, to her astonishment and overwhelming joy, was to accompany them. "Your keen eye, young Ilara," Henry stated, "and your unconventional perspective may prove invaluable. This voyage will require more than just seasoned sailors and learned scholars. It will require minds open to the truly extraordinary." The days following Prince Henry's decree at Sagres were a whirlwind of activity, a frantic crescendo of preparations that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. For Ilara, the world had indeed cracked open, revealing not just a new horizon, but a new set of challenges. Her inclusion in the expedition, while a testament to her keen intellect and Master Mateo's trust, was met with a mixture of awe and outright skepticism by many within the prince's retinue. A woman on a voyage of discovery, particularly one into the fabled green sea of darkness, was an unprecedented notion, bordering on the scandalous. The ship assigned to Master Mateo and Ilara was the São Miguel, a sturdy caravel, smaller and swifter than the cumbersome carracks, designed for exploration rather than cargo. Its sleek lines and lateen sails spoke of speed and maneuverability, crucial attributes for navigating uncharted waters. Captain Mendez, a man of few words but immense experience, would command the flagship, the Santa Maria, a slightly larger vessel. Two other caravels, the Esperanza and the Ventura, completed the small fleet, each manned by a crew of seasoned sailors, many of whom had already ventured down the African coast. Ilara's immediate task was to assist Master Mateo in preparing the cartographic supplies. This involved not only gathering vellum, inks, quills, and compasses, but also ensuring the delicate navigational instruments, astrolabes, quadrants, and cross-staffs, were properly secured against the inevitable rigors of the open ocean. They spent hours in the workshop, now a hive of controlled chaos, packing chests with dried provisions, barrels of water, and spare rigging. The impossible map, the catalyst for this audacious venture, was meticulously encased in a waterproof leather cylinder, guarded with the reverence of a sacred relic. Beyond the practicalities, Ilara faced a more subtle, yet equally formidable, battle: the pervasive skepticism of the male-dominated maritime world. Sailors, superstitious by nature, eyed her with suspicion. Some muttered about ill omens. Others openly questioned her ability to withstand the hardships of a long voyage. Even some of the younger officers, though outwardly polite, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. She was not just a woman, she was a cartographer, a role traditionally reserved for men of learning and experience. Master Mateo, ever her quiet champion, shielded her where he could, but he also understood that Ilara needed to earn her place. "They will judge you by your work, Ilara," he advised one evening, as they meticulously checked the calibration of an astrolabe. "Show them your competence, and their doubts will wither like dry leaves." Ilara took his words to heart. She worked tirelessly, often long after the sun had dipped below the horizon, illuminating the workshop with the flickering glow of oil lamps. She studied the stars, memorizing their positions and movements, practicing the complex calculations required for celestial navigation. She learned to tie knots, to identify different types of timber, and even to distinguish the subtle nuances of wind direction by the feel of the air on her skin. She absorbed every scrap of knowledge Mateo imparted, knowing that her survival, and indeed the success of the expedition, might hinge on her understanding. Her most significant ally, surprisingly, proved to be Captain Mendez. Despite his initial gruffness, the old mariner possessed a deep respect for skill, regardless of its source. He had witnessed Ilara's quiet determination at Sagres, and her insightful observation about the map's lived precision had clearly impressed him. He saw beyond her gender to her undeniable talent. On several occasions, he would approach her with a navigational problem, testing her knowledge, and each time, Ilara would provide a precise, well-reasoned answer, slowly chipping away at his initial skepticism. He even began to include her in discussions with his other captains, allowing her to contribute to the planning of the voyage, much to the quiet astonishment of the other officers. "She has an eye for detail," Mendez would grumble, a rare hint of approval in his voice, "and a mind that sees beyond the horizon, like the prince himself." The day of departure arrived with a clear, crisp dawn. The docks of Porto Sol were thronged with people, a mix of well-wishers, curious onlookers, and those who had come to bid farewell to loved ones. The air vibrated with the excited chatter of the crowd, the creak of ropes, and the rhythmic chant of sailors hoisting sails. The caravels, their new canvas gleaming white in the morning sun, looked like majestic birds poised for flight. Ilara stood on the deck of the São Miguel, the salty breeze whipping her hair around her face. She wore practical, sturdy clothes, a far cry from the finer garments she usually wore in the workshop. Beside her, Master Mateo, his usually stoic face etched with a rare blend of excitement and solemnity, gripped the railing. The impossible map, now secured in a specially built chart table below deck, seemed to hum beneath their feet. As the last lines were cast off and the São Miguel slowly pulled away from the dock, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Ilara looked back at the receding coastline of Portugal, the familiar rooftops of Porto Sol shrinking into the distance. A pang of homesickness, sharp and unexpected, pierced her excitement, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of exhilaration. She was truly embarking on the unknown, leaving behind the comforts of the familiar for the vast, unpredictable expanse of the Atlantic. The initial days of the voyage were a test of endurance and adaptation. The constant roll and pitch of the ship, the cramped quarters, the monotonous diet of hardtack and salted meat, all contributed to a pervasive sense of discomfort. Many of the crew, even seasoned sailors, succumbed to seasickness in the first few days. Ilara, surprisingly, found her stomach to be resilient, a small victory that further solidified her place in the eyes of the crew. Her days were consumed by her duties. She meticulously recorded the ship's progress, taking celestial observations at dawn and dusk, calculating their latitude with painstaking accuracy. She worked alongside Mateo, constantly comparing their readings with the impossible map, trying to discern patterns, to find any familiar landmarks that might confirm its veracity. The map, however, remained stubbornly enigmatic, its features unlike anything they encountered. The ocean itself was a living, breathing entity. Days of calm, where the sea was a shimmering expanse of sapphire, would give way to sudden, violent storms. The caravels tossed about like toys in the grip of a giant. Ilara learned to brace herself against the lurching deck, to distinguish the different cries of the wind, to read the subtle shifts in the clouds that foretold a change in weather. She saw phosphorescent plankton illuminate the night sea like scattered jewels and witnessed pods of whales breach the surface, their colossal forms a humbling reminder of nature's grandeur. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep purple, Elara stood on deck, watching the stars emerge. She pulled out her own small, well-worn chart of the familiar constellations, comparing it to the vast, unfamiliar expanse above. She noticed it then, a subtle deviation, a star that should have been there missing, and another, fainter, now burning with an unexpected brilliance. It was exactly as the impossible map had suggested. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of profound wonder. The map was not a fabrication. It was a truth, waiting to be unveiled. She sought out Master Mateo, who was already at the stern, observing the stars with his quadrant. "Master," she said, her voice hushed with excitement, "the stars, they are different, just as the map showed." Mateo lowered his quadrant, his gaze meeting hers. A rare smile touched his lips, a smile of shared discovery. "Indeed, Elara," he murmured. "We are sailing into a new sky, and with it a new understanding of our place in the cosmos." Weeks bled into months as the small Portuguese fleet pushed relentlessly westward, a tiny speck of ambition swallowed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the Atlantic. The familiar blue of the coastal waters had long since given way to a deeper, almost indigo hue, a color that spoke of unimaginable depths and endless horizons. The São Miguel, along with the Santa Maria, Esperança, and Ventura, became their entire world, a floating microcosm of human endeavor and vulnerability. Life aboard the caravel settled into a monotonous rhythm dictated by the wind, the waves, and the ceaseless demands of the ship. Days began with the rising sun, its fiery orb climbing from the eastern rim of the ocean, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Elara, often on deck before dawn, would assist Master Mateo in taking celestial observations, her fingers numb. With the morning chill as she adjusted the astrolabe, her eyes scanning the fading stars. The subtle differences in the constellations, which had initially been a source of wonder, now became a constant, almost eerie confirmation of their journey into truly alien skies. Each night, a new star would appear, or a familiar one would shift its position, a silent, cosmic affirmation of the impossible map's veracity. The crew, initially a mix of hardened veterans and wide-eyed novices, had by now become a cohesive unit, bound by the shared experience of the voyage. The initial skepticism surrounding Elara had gradually dissipated, replaced by a grudging respect, and in some cases a quiet admiration. Her resilience in the face of seasickness, her meticulous record-keeping, and her surprising aptitude for navigation had earned her a place, albeit an unconventional one, among the mariners. She could now identify the subtle shifts in the wind by the feel of it on her cheek, predict a squall by the color of the clouds, and even assist in minor repairs to the rigging, her small hands surprisingly strong and adept. Yet, the psychological toll of the voyage began to weigh heavily. The endless horizon, day after day, week after week, stretched the limits of human endurance. Fresh water, though carefully rationed, grew stale and brackish. The hardtack became harder, the salted meat more unpalatable. Scurvy, the dreaded scourge of long voyages, began to show its first insidious signs. Swollen gums, aching joints, a pervasive lethargy that crept through the crew like a silent plague. Master Mateo, despite his efforts to maintain a healthy diet with what little citrus they had brought, found himself battling the onset of the disease, his movements slower, his usually sharp mind occasionally clouded. Fear, too, was a constant companion. The fear of the unknown, of mythical sea monsters that lurked in the depths, of falling off the edge of the world, of never seeing home again. Whispers of mutiny, though quickly suppressed by Captain Mendez's stern authority, occasionally rippled through the lower decks. The men, far from the comforting familiarity of land, began to question the sanity of their mission, to doubt the impossible map that had lured them into this watery abyss. One particularly violent storm, a tempest that lasted for 3 days and nights, tested the very limits of their caravels. Waves the size of mountains crashed over the decks, threatening to splinter the timbers and tear the sails to shreds. The wind howled like a banshee, ripping through the rigging, and the constant lurching of the ship sent men sprawling. Ilara, lashed to the mainmast alongside Master Mateo, worked tirelessly, her hands bleeding from the ropes, her voice hoarse from shouting orders over the roar of the gale. It was during this storm that the impossible map proved its worth in an unexpected way. As the storm raged, Captain Mendez, his face grim and etched with exhaustion, brought the map to Mateo. "Master," he yelled over the wind, "the currents, they are not as they should be. We are being driven too far north." Mateo, his eyes strained, consulted the ancient vellum. He pointed to a faint, almost imperceptible series of swirling lines. On the map, lines that indicated a powerful, northward-flowing current in this very region. "It is marked here, Captain," he shouted back, his voice thin but resolute. "A great river of the ocean flowing from the south. We must adjust our course or be swept far from our intended path." Guided by the map's cryptic warning and Mateo's interpretation, Mendez ordered a daring maneuver, a perilous adjustment of the sails that, against all odds, allowed them to ride the current rather than be overwhelmed by it. When the storm finally abated, leaving behind a bruised but intact fleet, the crew looked at the impossible map and at Ilara and Mateo with a newfound reverence. It was no longer just a curiosity, it was a lifeline. As the weeks continued, the air began to change. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, then growing stronger. The salty tang of the open ocean began to mingle with a new scent, an earthy, vegetal aroma that spoke of distant land. Birds, small land dwellers, began to appear, exhausted, landing on the rigging to rest before continuing their flight. Then came the driftwood. Not just isolated pieces, but entire branches, some still bearing leaves carried on the currents. The tension on board became palpable. Every eye was fixed on the western horizon, straining for the first glimpse of land. Hope, a fragile commodity, began to blossom in the hearts of the weary sailors. The impossible map, once a source of fear and doubt, was now consulted with fervent anticipation, its detailed coastlines and river systems becoming a beacon of promise. One crisp morning, as the first rays of the sun pierced the lingering mists, a cry echoed from the crow's nest of the Santa Maria, a sound that sent shivers of exhilaration down every spine. "Land! Land ahoy!" A collective gasp, then a roar of triumph erupted from the fleet. Men cheered, wept, embraced each other, their exhaustion and fear momentarily forgotten in the face of this miraculous sight. Ilara, standing on the deck of the São Miguel, felt tears stream down her face, blurring the distant outline. It was there, a dark, undulating line against the pale blue of the dawn sky, exactly where the impossible map had said it would be. As they drew closer, the details began to emerge. Not the low-lying sandy shores of Africa, but a coastline of breathtaking grandeur. Towering cliffs, their faces scarred by centuries of wind and water, rose majestically from the sea, crowned by a dense emerald-green forest that stretched as far as the eye can see. Rivers, wide and powerful, emptied into the ocean, their currents churning the water into frothy eddies. The air was thick with the scent of unknown blossoms and damp earth, a rich, vibrant aroma that was utterly alien, yet profoundly inviting. Captain Mendez, his voice hoarse with emotion, ordered the fleet to slow their approach, proceeding with extreme caution. The impossible map, now unrolled on the chart table, was their guide, detailing hidden coves and treacherous shoals that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. They found a wide, sheltered bay, its entrance guarded by two rocky headlands, just as depicted on the ancient vellum. As the caravels dropped anchor in the calm waters of the bay, the silence that followed the initial jubilation was profound. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves against the hulls, and the distant cries of exotic birds from the lush forest. Before them lay a world untouched, unseen by European eyes, a land of unimaginable scale and mystery. The cities built, into the cliffs, the feathered serpents, the colossal birds. They were no longer just illustrations on a map. They were possibilities waiting to be discovered. Ilara stood at the railing, her gaze sweeping over the verdant landscape, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The air was warm and humid, alive with the buzzing of unseen insects and the rustling of leaves. This was it, the new world. The impossible had become reality. The age of empires and exploration had not just found a new land. It had found a new continent, a vast, untamed wilderness that promised both untold riches and unimaginable dangers. Their journey had ended, but a new, far grander adventure was just beginning. The first light of dawn on the shores of the New World was unlike anything the Portuguese explorers had ever witnessed. It was not merely the sun rising, but a vibrant, almost spiritual awakening of the land itself. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and exotic flora, hummed with the unseen life of the jungle. Strange, melodious bird calls echoed from the dense canopy, and the rustling of leaves hinted at creatures unseen. The towering cliffs, which had seemed so imposing from the sea, now revealed themselves as living walls of verdant growth, draped in vines and flowering plants of astonishing colors. Captain Mendez, a man whose life had been defined by the predictable rhythms of the known seas, felt a profound sense of awe, tinged with the familiar prickle of caution. He had landed on new shores before, but never on a land of such immense scale and palpable mystery. The impossible map, now laid out on the chart table in the Santa Maria's cabin, was no longer just a guide. It was a prophecy fulfilled, a testament to a world far grander and more complex than any European had ever conceived. The immediate priority was to establish a secure foothold. A landing party was dispatched, a small contingent of armed men, led by Captain Mendez himself, along with Master Mateo and Ilara. Their task was to scout the immediate vicinity, search for fresh water, and assess any potential threats. As they rowed towards the shore in the longboats, the sheer vibrancy of the landscape became overwhelming. Giant ferns brushed the water's edge, and trees whose species were utterly unknown rose hundreds of feet into the sky, their branches forming a dense, impenetrable ceiling. Stepping onto the soft, dark earth felt like stepping into another dimension. The ground was spongy with centuries of decaying leaves, and the air was thick with humidity. The sounds of the jungle enveloped them. The incessant chirping of insects, the distant calls of unseen animals, the rustling of leaves underfoot. Ilara, her senses overwhelmed, felt a thrill of discovery that dwarfed any fear. This was the blank space on the map, now filled with astonishing reality. She immediately began sketching in her journal, trying to capture the impossible greens, the vibrant blues of unknown flowers, the sheer immensity of the trees. They quickly found a freshwater stream, its waters cool and clear, tumbling down from the forest. The relief among the crew was palpable. Fresh water was life on a long voyage. While the men replenished their water barrels, Matteo and Ilara began to meticulously survey the bay, comparing the actual coastline with the ancient map. To their astonishment, the map's details were incredibly accurate, even down to the subtle curves of the shoreline and the precise location of the stream. It was as if the original cartographer had stood exactly where they stood centuries ago. As they ventured further inland, following the stream, the first signs of intelligent life emerged. Not the grand cliffside cities depicted on the map, but subtle, almost imperceptible traces. A neatly stacked pile of stones, an arrangement of branches that seemed too deliberate to be natural, a faint, almost overgrown path leading deeper into the jungle. The air grew heavier, not just with humidity, but with a sense of being watched. Captain Mendez, ever vigilant, ordered his men to proceed with extreme caution, their crossbows and arquebuses at the ready. The stories of fierce, cannibalistic natives were deeply ingrained in the European psyche, fueled by exaggerated tales from early African voyages. Yet the impossible map had depicted the inhabitants of this land not as savages, but as people of advanced civilization with intricate architecture and complex symbols. The contradiction hung heavy in the humid air. Their first encounter came unexpectedly. As they rounded a bend in the stream, they stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center, a group of figures, their skin a rich, earthy brown, their bodies adorned with intricate tattoos and vibrant feather ornaments, stood frozen. They were unlike any people the Europeans had ever seen. Their eyes, dark and intelligent, regarded the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They carried no weapons, only baskets woven from reeds and tools made of polished stone. A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the chirping of insects. Captain Mendez, ever the pragmatist, raised an open hand, a gesture of peace. Master. Matteo, remembering the prince's instructions to seek knowledge, stepped forward, holding up a small polished brass mirror, a common trade item. One of the native figures, a man of imposing stature with a headdress of brilliant green and red. Feathers slowly raised his own hand in return. His eyes, however, were fixed not on the mirror, but on Ilara, specifically on the small silver compass she wore around her neck, a gift from Master Matteo. It was a simple, practical instrument, but to the native it seemed to hold a profound significance. He pointed to it, then to the sky, and then made a series of complex gestures that seemed to indicate the movement of stars. Ilara, understanding instinctively, unclasped the compass and held it out. The native approached cautiously, his gaze never leaving her face. He took the compass, turning it over in his hands, his fingers tracing the delicate needle. He then looked at Alara again, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps understanding, in his eyes. He spoke then, a language of soft, guttural sounds, utterly alien, yet strangely melodic. Mateo, ever the scholar, immediately began to try and discern patterns in their speech, but it was Alara who made the first breakthrough. Remembering the symbols on the impossible map, she took out her journal and began to sketch some of the glyphs she had memorized. The native's eyes widened. He pointed to her drawing, then to himself, and then to the map itself, which Mateo had brought ashore, carefully protected in its cylinder. It was a moment of profound realization. The impossible map was not just a depiction of their land, it was, in some way, their map. The symbols were their writing, their history, their knowledge. The native, through gestures and a few repeated words, conveyed that his people were the Sky Watchers, guardians of ancient knowledge, and that the map was a relic from a time of great upheaval, a time when their ancestors had charted the very stars. The initial encounter, fraught with tension, slowly transformed into a cautious exchange. The Sky Watchers, though wary, seemed to possess a deep-seated curiosity and a surprising reverence for the map. They led the Europeans to their village, a collection of intricately woven reed and timber dwellings nestled amongst the trees, almost invisible from a distance. It was not the grand stone cities depicted on the map, but a testament to a people living in harmony with their environment. Over the next few days, a fragile bridge of communication began to form. Through a combination of gestures, shared observations of the stars, and Alara's increasingly accurate sketches of the map's symbols, they began to piece together a rudimentary understanding. The Sky Watchers were a peaceful people, deeply connected to the land and the cosmos. They spoke of a vast empire that had once existed, a civilization that had built the cliffside cities and possessed knowledge of the stars and the currents that far surpassed European understanding. This empire, they explained, had fallen centuries ago, shattered by internal strife and a great cataclysm, leaving their people scattered and their knowledge fragmented. The impossible map, they revealed, was a fragment of their ancestral wisdom, a relic of a time when their people had explored far beyond their own shores, even to the distant lands across the great ocean. The feathered serpents were not monsters, but sacred symbols, representations of their deities and their ancient lineage. For Alara, this was the true treasure of the New World. Not gold or spices, but knowledge. The Sky Watchers, with their gentle demeanor and profound understanding of their world, offered a glimpse into a different way of life, a different perspective on existence. She spent hours with their elders, learning about their cosmology, their agricultural practices, their intricate social structures. She learned that the great river of the ocean marked on the map was indeed a powerful current, one they had long used for their own voyages. The age of empires and exploration had just taken an unexpected turn. It was no longer just about conquest and resource extraction, but about encounter, understanding, and the humbling realization that the world held far more wonders and far more wisdom than Europe had ever dared to imagine. The impossible map had not just led them to a new land, it had led them to a new understanding of humanity itself. The fragile peace established between the Portuguese explorers and the Sky Watchers blossomed into a period of intense, almost feverish learning. For Alara, these weeks were a revelation, a profound re-education that shattered her Eurocentric worldview. The Sky Watchers, far from being the savages depicted in European lore, were a people of deep wisdom, their lives intricately woven into the fabric of the natural world and the cosmic dance of the stars. Their village, a harmonious blend of woven reeds, polished timber, and living foliage, was a testament to their sustainable existence, a stark contrast to the stone and mortar cities of Europe. Ilara spent her days immersed in their culture, a willing student of their elders. She learned their language, a melodic tapestry of soft guttural sounds and intricate clicks, her cartographer's ear proving surprisingly adept at mimicking its nuances. With each new word, a new layer of understanding unfolded. The feathered, serpents, once mysterious symbols on the impossible map, were revealed to be Quetzalcoatl, a revered deity representing creation, wisdom, and the cyclical nature of life. The colossal birds were not fantastical beasts, but representations of the harpy eagle, a majestic predator of their dense forests, elevated to a totemic status. The Sky Watchers' cosmology was a complex and beautiful system centered around the movements of celestial bodies. They had observed the stars for millennia, their knowledge of planetary cycles, solstices, and equinoxes far surpassing anything known in Europe. Their elders, with eyes that held the wisdom of generations, taught Ilara how to read the subtle shifts in the night sky, how to predict the changing seasons by the position of certain constellations, and how to navigate by the stars with an intuitive grace that made European instruments seem cumbersome. The sky is our first map, an elder named Xochitl, whose face was a road map of gentle wrinkles, explained to Ilara through gestures and nascent words. It tells us when to plant, when to harvest, when the rains will come. It tells us where we are and where we have been. Ilara, in turn, shared her own knowledge. She showed them her compass, explaining its unwavering pull to the north, a concept that fascinated the Sky Watchers. She demonstrated her astrolabe, explaining how it measured the height of the stars, and drew diagrams of the Earth as a sphere, a concept that, while not entirely alien to their own cosmology, sparked lively debate and curious questions. The Tao, impossible map, their shared artifact, became the bridge between their two worlds, a tangible link to a forgotten past and a shared future. Master Mateo, initially more reserved, found himself equally captivated. He spent hours with the Sky Watchers' scribes, examining their intricate glyphs, comparing them to the symbols on the ancient map. He discovered that their writing system was a sophisticated blend of logograms and phonetic symbols, capable of conveying complex ideas. He began to painstakingly copy their texts, his scholar's heart pounding with the thrill of deciphering a lost language, a lost history. Captain Mendez, meanwhile, focused on the more practical aspects of their presence. He oversaw the establishment of a temporary camp on shore, a fortified perimeter to protect against any unforeseen threats. He sent out scouting parties to explore the immediate vicinity, to search for resources, and to ensure the safety of the fleet. He observed the Sky Watchers with a keen, pragmatic eye, noting their agricultural techniques, their hunting methods, and their surprisingly efficient use of resources. He saw not just a different culture, but a potential source of trade, a new market for European goods and perhaps new resources for the crown. However, the longer they stayed, the more apparent the differences in their worldviews became. While the Sky Watchers were open and generous with their knowledge, they possessed no concept of private land ownership in the European sense. The land, to them, was a shared resource, a living entity to be respected and nurtured. The idea of claiming territory, of drawing lines on a map and declaring it one's own, was utterly alien to them. This fundamental divergence, though unspoken, created a subtle tension beneath the surface of their amicable interactions. Moreover, the Skywatchers spoke of the great cataclysm that had shattered their ancient empire. They described it as a time of immense upheaval, when the very earth had trembled and the sky had rained fire. It was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. They warned the Europeans against the pursuit of unchecked power and the exploitation of the land, speaking of a balance that must be maintained, a harmony between humanity and nature. One afternoon, as Ilara sat with Xochitl, sketching the intricate patterns of a native textile, the elder paused, her gaze distant. "The map," she said, her voice soft. "It shows not just where we are, but where the heart of the old empire lies. The cities in the cliffs. They hold secrets and dangers." Ilara's heart quickened. She had seen the illustrations on the map, the impossibly grand structures carved into the mountainsides. She had assumed they were ruins, remnants of a long-lost civilization. But Xochitl's words hinted at something more. When Ilara relayed this conversation to Master Mateo and Captain Mendez, it sparked a new wave of discussion. The primary objective of their mission was to verify the map and explore the land. The Paxay discovery of a living, albeit fragmented civilization was an unexpected bonus. But the mention of secrets and dangers from the Skywatchers, combined with the lure of the cliff cities, ignited a renewed sense of purpose, and perhaps a touch of European ambition. Captain Mendez, ever focused on the Crown's interests, saw the potential for immense wealth. If these cities hold knowledge, he reasoned, they may also hold riches, gold, jewels, spices, perhaps even the source of their advanced understanding. Mateo, however, was more cautious. "The Skywatchers speak of a cataclysm, Captain. We must proceed with prudence. Knowledge is one thing, but greed can lead to ruin." Ilara, caught between the scholarly pursuit of knowledge and the pragmatic demands of exploration, felt a growing unease. She had come to respect the Skywatchers, their peaceful ways, their deep connection to their land. The idea of disturbing their ancestral sites, of potentially unleashing unforeseen dangers, troubled her. Yet, the allure of the cliff cities, the promise of unraveling the full mystery of the impossible map, was a powerful draw. After much deliberation, a decision was made. A smaller, more agile expedition would be formed, consisting of Captain Mendez, Master Mateo, Ilara, and a select group of armed men. They would venture inland, guided by the impossible map and the Skywatchers' cryptic warnings, to seek out the fabled cliff cities. The remaining caravels would stay anchored in the bay, maintaining the camp and continuing their observations. The Skywatchers, though expressing their concerns, provided them with provisions and a few of their own guides, young men and women who knew the intricate paths of the jungle like the back of their hands. As the small expedition prepared to depart, Xochitl approached Ilara, her eyes filled with a solemn wisdom. "Go with open eyes, little cartographer," she said, placing a small, intricately carved stone amulet in Ilara's hand. "The old empire held great power but also great hubris. Remember the balance. The land gives, but it also takes." Ilara clutched the amulet, its smooth surface warm against her palm. Its simple beauty and Xochitl's words resonated deeply within her. She was no longer just a cartographer, charting lines on a map. She was an emissary, carrying the hopes and fears of two vastly different worlds on her shoulders. The journey to the Cliff Cities was not just an exploration of a new land. It was a journey into the heart of an ancient mystery, a test of their understanding and a potential confrontation with the very forces that had shaped this new world. The age of empires and exploration was about to delve into its most profound and perilous chapter. The jungle swallowed them whole. The small expedition, a mere pinprick of European ambition against the vastness of the New World, embarked on their trek towards the fabled cliff cities, leaving the relative safety of the bay behind. The air, already thick with humidity, grew heavier, laden with the scent of decaying leaves, damp earth, and the cloying sweetness of unseen blossoms. The canopy overhead, a dense, interlocking ceiling of emerald and jade, filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly gloom. Their sky-watcher guides, young men and women named Itzel and Coatl, moved through the dense undergrowth with an effortless grace that spoke of generations spent in harmony with the wilderness. They seemed to navigate by instinct, reading the subtle shifts in the wind, the faint tracks of animals, and the almost imperceptible changes in the vegetation. For the Portuguese, accustomed to paved roads and open fields, the jungle was a suffocating labyrinth, a constant assault on their senses. Every step was a struggle, every rustle in the leaves a potential threat. Captain Mendez, ever the disciplined leader, maintained a vigilant watch, his hand never far from his sword hilt. His armed men, sweating profusely in their heavy European clothing, their faces grim with apprehension, moved in a tight formation, their arquebuses and crossbows at the ready. The jungle, with its unseen dangers and its overwhelming sense of primordial power, was a stark reminder of their vulnerability. Master. Mateo, despite his age and the lingering effects of scurvy, pushed on with a scholar's relentless curiosity. He meticulously recorded every new plant, every strange insect, every unfamiliar bird call in his journal, his eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. He tried to decipher the meaning behind the sky-watchers' gestures and their melodic language, his mind constantly seeking patterns, connections, and deeper understandings. But it was Alara who truly thrived in this alien environment. The amulet Xochitl had given her, a smooth, intricately carved stone, felt warm against her skin, a tangible link to the wisdom of the Sky Watchers. Her cartographer's eye, trained to observe and record, now absorbed the intricate details of the jungle with an almost spiritual intensity. She noticed the delicate patterns on the wings of butterflies, the vibrant colors of poisonous frogs, the subtle shifts in the forest floor that indicated a hidden path. She learned to identify edible plants from poisonous ones, to listen for the warning calls of birds, and to distinguish the rustle of a harmless animal from the slither of a venomous snake. Itzel and Coatl, initially reserved, gradually warmed to Alara. They recognized her genuine curiosity, her respect for their land and their ways. They taught her how to track, how to find hidden water sources, and how to move silently through the undergrowth. They shared their knowledge of the jungle's medicinal plants, its sacred groves, and its ancient legends. Alara, in turn, shared stories of Europe, of its grand cathedrals and bustling cities, of its kings and its scholars, bridging the vast cultural chasm with shared humanity. The journey was arduous. They navigated treacherous ravines, forded swift-flowing rivers, and hacked their way through dense thickets of thorny vines. The humid air was a breeding ground for insects, and the constant threat of unseen predators, from jaguars to venomous snakes, kept them on edge. Supplies dwindled, and the men grew weary, their faces etched with exhaustion and the lingering effects of the long sea voyage. As they delved deeper, the landscape began to change. The flat, dense jungle floor gradually gave way to rising terrain. The trees, though still immense, became less uniform, interspersed with rocky outcrops and steeper slopes. The air grew slightly cooler, and the sounds of the jungle, though still present, became less overwhelming, replaced by the distant murmur of rushing water and the whisper of wind through higher altitudes. Then, on the 10th day of their trek, as they emerged from a particularly dense patch of jungle onto a rocky plateau, they saw it. Rising majestically from the heart of the mountains, carved directly into the sheer face of a colossal cliff, were the fabled cities. It was a sight that stole their breath, silencing even the most hardened of the Portuguese soldiers. Not ruins, as Alara had half expected, but a sprawling, meticulously crafted complex of structures, seamlessly integrated into the natural rock. Terraced buildings, their walls adorned with intricate carvings and vibrant frescoes, rose tier upon tier, connected by narrow staircases and suspended bridges that seemed to defy gravity. Waterfalls cascaded from the upper levels, creating shimmering veils of mist that caught the sunlight in 1,000 rainbows. Temples, their roofs adorned with the stylized images of feathered serpents, pierced the sky like ancient sentinels. The scale was immense, dwarfing anything they had ever seen in Europe. It was a testament to an architectural prowess that seemed beyond human capability, a civilization that had literally sculpted its existence from the very mountains. The impossible map had not exaggerated. If anything, it had understated the sheer grandeur of this place. "By the saints," Captain Mendez whispered, his voice hoarse with awe, "it is real." Mateo, his eyes wide with wonder, pulled out the impossible map, comparing it to the panorama before them. "Every detail," he murmured, "every line, it is all here. This is the heart of their ancient empire." Alara, her heart pounding, felt a profound sense of reverence. This was not just a discovery. It was an encounter with a lost world, a tangible link to the great cataclysm the Sky Watchers had spoken of. The city, though seemingly abandoned, radiated a powerful, almost spiritual energy, a sense of ancient wisdom and forgotten power. Itzel and Coatl, their faces solemn, pointed towards a path leading down into a deep valley, towards the base of the cliff. "The entrance," Itzel said, her voice soft, "to the heart." As they descended, the silence of the city became more pronounced. There were no sounds of life, no bustling markets, no children's laughter. Only the whisper of the wind through the empty courtyards and the distant rush of the waterfalls. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of stone and ancient dust. They reached the base of the cliff, where a massive, intricately carved archway, flanked by 2 colossal statues of feathered serpents, marked the entrance to the city. The carvings on the archway depicted scenes of cosmic events, of stars and planets, and of figures adorned with elaborate headdresses, seemingly engaged in profound rituals. Captain Mendez, ever cautious, ordered his men to proceed slowly, their weapons raised. The silence was unnerving, the emptiness of such a grand city unsettling. They stepped through the archway, their footsteps echoing loudly in the vast, empty plaza beyond. The city was a maze of courtyards, temples, and residential structures, all carved from the living rock. The walls were adorned with frescoes depicting scenes of daily life, of harvests and ceremonies, of warriors and priests. The colors, though faded by time, still retained a vibrant intensity, hinting at the artistic mastery of its former inhabitants. As they ventured deeper, they discovered evidence of the cataclysm the Skywatchers had spoken of. Cracks snaked through some of the massive stone blocks, and sections of walls had crumbled as if struck by an immense force. Yet, much of the city remained remarkably preserved, a testament to the engineering brilliance of its builders. They eventually reached the central temple, the largest and most ornate structure in the city. Its entrance was guarded by two more colossal feathered serpents, their eyes carved with an unnerving realism. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with a sense of profound antiquity. The walls were covered in a dense tapestry of glyphs, far more intricate and extensive than any Mateo had seen before. In the center of the temple stood a massive, circular stone altar, its surface etched with celestial maps and complex astronomical diagrams. Ilara, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and trepidation, approached the altar. She noticed a series of depressions on its surface, perfectly aligned with the celestial diagrams. Reaching into her pouch, she pulled out the impossible map, its contours, its symbols. Its very essence seemed to resonate with the ancient stone. As she laid the map onto the altar, a faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. The stone amulet in her hand vibrated, and the glyphs on the walls seemed to shimmer with a faint inner light. The impossible map, the key to this new world, had found its true home, its purpose revealed in the heart of a lost civilization. The age of empires and exploration had not just found a new land, it had found a lost truth, a profound connection to a past that would forever alter their understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. The hum that filled the ancient temple intensified, resonating deep within Ilara's bones. It was not a sound precisely, but a vibration, a profound energy that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the altar. The impossible map, now lying, perfectly aligned with the celestial diagrams etched into the stone, pulsed with a soft inner light. The glyphs on the temple walls, which had shimmered faintly upon their arrival, now glowed with a vibrant, ethereal luminescence, casting dancing shadows across the cavernous chamber. Captain Mendez and his men, initially startled by the sudden phenomenon, stood frozen, their weapons still raised, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. Master Mateo, however, his scholar's instincts overriding his apprehension, moved closer, his eyes fixed on the glowing map, a look of profound wonder on his face. Itzel and Coatl, the Skywatcher guides, knelt reverently, their heads bowed, their hands pressed to the ground as if communing with the ancient power that had awakened. Then, from the depths of the altar, a projection of light sprang forth, coalescing into a shimmering, three-dimensional image above the stone. It was a star map, but unlike any they had ever seen. Constellations shifted and moved, planets orbited unseen suns, and nebulae swirled in breathtaking detail. It was a living, breathing map of the cosmos, far more intricate and dynamic than any European astronomer could have conceived. As the star map expanded, it began to zoom in, focusing on a specific cluster of stars, then a single star system. Images flickered across the projection, a vibrant, bustling city, far grander than even the cliff cities, built not into mountains, but soaring into the sky, its structures gleaming with an unknown material. Figures, tall and slender, moved through these cities, their faces serene, their bodies adorned with flowing garments and intricate headpieces. They were the ancestors of the Sky Watchers, the builders of the ancient empire, depicted not as primitive people, but as a highly advanced civilization. The projection then shifted, showing scenes of their daily lives, their advanced agricultural techniques, their intricate social structures, their profound connection to the natural world. It showed their knowledge of engineering, their mastery of astronomy, and their deep understanding of the cosmos. It was a silent, visual history, a testament to a civilization that had reached heights of knowledge and harmony that Europe had yet to imagine. But then, the images began to change. The vibrant cities began to show cracks. The serene faces of the people became etched with worry. The projection depicted internal strife, conflicts over resources, a gradual erosion of the harmony that had once defined their society. Then came the cataclysm. The earth trembled, mountains split open, and fire rained from the sky. The soaring cities crumbled, the intricate structures shattered, and the once thriving civilization was brought to its knees. It was a devastating, heartbreaking depiction of the great cataclysm the Sky Watchers had spoken of, a powerful visual warning of unchecked ambition and the consequences of losing balance with the natural world. The projection then focused on the survivors, the ancestors of the Sky Watchers, fleeing the ruins of their empire, seeking refuge in the hidden valleys and dense jungles. It showed them painstakingly preserving their knowledge, their history, and their understanding of the stars, inscribing it onto maps and carving it into stone, hoping that one day it would be rediscovered. The impossible map, now glowing brighter than ever on the altar, was revealed to be a fragment of this preserved knowledge, a key left behind for future generations. As the projection faded, the hum in the temple slowly subsided, and the glyphs on the walls dimmed, returning to their ancient silent state. The impossible map, however, continued to glow with a faint, steady light, its purpose now fully revealed. A profound silence filled the chamber, broken only by the soft breathing of the explorers. Captain Mendez, his face pale, slowly lowered his sword. The images they had witnessed had shaken him to his core, challenging his understanding of power, conquest, and the very nature of civilization. He had come seeking gold and new lands, but he had found something far more valuable, a glimpse into a lost history, a cautionary tale etched in light. Master Mateo, his eyes still wide with wonder, approached the altar. He gently touched the glowing map, his fingers tracing its contours. This changes everything," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our understanding of history, of human potential, it is all incomplete. We are but children, sailing on the surface of a vast, unknown ocean of knowledge." Ilara, her heart overflowing with a mixture of awe, sorrow, and a renewed sense of purpose, felt a tear trace a path down her cheek. The Sky Watchers' wisdom, their warnings of hubris and imbalance, resonated deeply within her. The age of empires, with its relentless pursuit of conquest and wealth, suddenly seemed a fragile, potentially destructive path. Itzel and Coatl rose, their faces serene. Itzel approached Ilara, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "The knowledge is yours now, little cartographer," she said in her melodic tongue, her words translated by Alara for Mateo and Mendez. "Remember the balance. The stars guide, but the earth sustains. Do not forget the lessons of the old empire." The expedition spent several more days in the Cliff City, meticulously documenting everything they saw. Mateo, with Alara's help, copied as many of the glyphs as possible, hoping to one day decipher the full extent of the ancient empire's knowledge. Captain Mendez, though still driven by the Crown's mandate, found his priorities subtly shifting. The allure of gold was still strong, but it was now tempered by a newfound respect for the land and its people, and a profound understanding of the fragility of even the grandest civilizations. The journey back to the bay was different. The jungle, though still dense and challenging, no longer felt as threatening. Alara, guided by Itzel and Coatl, moved. With a newfound confidence, her senses attuned to the subtle rhythms of the wilderness. The Portuguese soldiers, though still weary, carried themselves with a quiet solemnity, their minds grappling with the revelations they had witnessed. Upon their return to the caravels, the news of their discovery spread like wildfire through the fleet. The men, who had been on the verge of mutiny weeks earlier, listened in stunned silence as Captain Mendez recounted their journey into the mountains, the discovery of the cliff cities, and the astonishing projection of the lost empire. The impossible map, now returned to its waterproof cylinder, was no longer just a navigational tool. It was a symbol of a profound truth, a bridge between worlds. The voyage back to Portugal was long and arduous, but it was also a journey of transformation. The impossible map, now a tangible reality, guided them across the vast ocean, its subtle details proving invaluable in navigating currents and avoiding storms. Alara, now more than just an apprentice, spent hours with Mateo, discussing the implications of their discoveries, dreaming of a future where knowledge and understanding, rather than conquest and exploitation, would define the age of exploration. When the fleet finally sailed into the familiar harbor of Porto Sol, months after their departure, they were met not with the usual cheers of triumph, but with a stunned silence. The caravels, weathered and scarred by the long voyage, looked like ghosts returning from another world. But it was the faces of the crew, etched with exhaustion and profound experience, that truly spoke of the incredible journey they had undertaken. Prince Henry, upon hearing their full account, examined the impossible map, now a sacred artifact, with a reverence that bordered on awe. He listened intently as Alara and Mateo recounted the history of the Sky Watchers, the rise and fall of their ancient empire, and the wisdom they had imparted. The implications were staggering, not just for Portugal, but for all of Europe. The world was not just larger, it was infinitely more complex, its history far deeper and richer than anyone had ever imagined. The impossible map, once a whisper from the horizon, had become a thunderous roar, shattering the old world order and ushering in a new era. The Age of Empires would continue, but it would now be forever shaped by the profound truths discovered in the heart of a lost civilization. And Alara, the young cartographer from Porto Sol, would forever be known as one of the first to truly chart not just new lands, but a new understanding of humanity's place in the vast, wondrous, and interconnected cosmos.